Welcome back, KCFL GMs. This is your inside look at the league for after week 2. Here we go. We have some exciting scores. The Thunder and the Tanks just rolled into town and rolled over Jesus and GM Rennick's squad. And the deeds stayed dirty this week. We had father and father-in-law versus son and son-in-law matches, and two best friends going head-to-head. We'll take a look at all those scores and the division matchups, the division lineup this week. It has been fascinating and scary and terrifying to be a GM of a fantasy team this week. Let's look at the Dawson division, where Chris Worth and Poobie Farms have remained atop with a powerful win over the challenger newcomer Edmore. Had a great squad. It was supposed to be 50-50 even matchup. Didn't turn out that way. Even after Mostert's amazing 80-yard touchdown run to kick things off, Ed had to be feeling good, but Chris's team just had the staying power, and sometimes you can just set your best lineup and pray, and it doesn't work out. Eric is riding in second place with a 2-0 record over Kyle. Pat, 1-1. Still looking to challenge for that spot with a strong 32-point win over the punitive measures. In the Stenerud division, we'll talk about that score. We'll talk about Dave's team here. He is sitting at the top 2-0 over his buddy Sherm, who, kind of quietly has come into the league. These last few years he struggled, but he picked up all the Chiefs, so I find it hard to root against him right now. I definitely don't want anyone to get injured. I don't want to see any little red Swiss flags, as Chris told me. He said, my whole team is covered with Swiss flags. I don't want to see that on Sherm's team. I don't want to see those Chiefs go down. So I hate to say it, but he might be looking at a 0 in that right-hand column for quite a while. Saigon Jesus and I are stuck in the middle there at 1-1. And the Chicago Dogs. Once again, I'm sorry, Chicago Dogs. Last week, I thought that was going to be the end of your miseries. Deshaun Watson just didn't do it for you. 13 points was not enough, and it was, by no fault of Zeke or anyone else on your team necessarily, but just didn't work out against Dave, and it wouldn't have worked out against, nothing you could have done really would have worked out against Dave this week. Let's put it that way. Let's take a look at that high score of Dave's. It was all time. And, there's a few teams that have summited that 200-point peak, that have reached that rarefied air, crossing into that second century score point. And we're talking about Pat, we're talking about Kyle, we're talking about Eric over the last 20 years of KCFL football. And there's been some people who've been close a few times. There's been some strivers. There have been some big margins of victory. But never has anyone in the league's history scored over 220 points. It just hasn't been done until now. Eric came close in 2007, the year of our Lord, with 219. Kyle in 2015 with 211. Pat in 2014 with 205. The Tanks in their heyday, 204 points. 2010 was a good year for the Tanks. And just a couple years ago, Eric had 203. Now, Dave has been on the losing side of those high-scoring games more often than not. In 2007 and 2015, he lost to father and son duos, Eric and Kyle, at those 219 and 211-point games, and those were not pretty matchups. This time, he gets to say, little brother no more, I'm on top. And I'm not just on top for 1 week, I'm on top for the entire league's history. 223 points, riding that Aaron Jones 50-point performance, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Greg the Leg, and his quarterback, Russell Wilson. Now, it's almost like Dave could have done no wrong this week because his bench would have beat quite a few people's starting teams, I feel like, in most leagues across most weeks. So it wasn't even his best lineup. It's just not fair. Dave would demur and be the humble man that he is and say it was just a good week, just a lot of luck, just, we take it one day at a time. He probably sounded a lot like Patrick Mahomes. You know what? I'm on to the next week. But that's not how it's going to be, I feel like. I think there's more to come from Dave, and it is going to be interesting to watch. Pat still has the highest margin of victory at 170 points from his over 200 point mark. Just crazy. And one more point about Dave. His highest and lowest point scores for his entire career as a KCFL GM, 193 points from his apex to the nadir. He scored only 30 points, a paltry 30 points back in 2003, the year I graduated from high school with Chris and Ed and Kyle, if you want to make the old timers feel old. But he's come a long way since then, as have we, and as has this league. So hopefully we see even more records set in a good way, but we've sadly seen quite a few record injuries. And in order to hear more on that, we're going to go to our man in the field, Ed Moore, distance correspondent for the KCFL. Ed, what have you got for us on these injuries this week?
Fumble risky news. Good morning. I'm Dwayne Aberfeldy. Week 2 of the 2020 NFL season has come to a rather odorous conclusion, full of smells of victory and the rancid stink of defeat. But above all else, there was one resounding sound that echoed across the nation. Ouch! Boo-boos, owies, and oopsie-daisies rained havoc across the league in Week 2 with some of the most top-caliber players out for days, weeks, months, perhaps even minutes. Here's a quick breakdown of the most heartbreaking losses to fantasy owners. The 49ers' fearsome Nick Bosa tore his ACL against the fearsome New York Jets and their balls-out offense. I'm not sure what ACL is, but if there's 3 capitalized letters in a row, you know it means yikes. Green Bay's downright delicious Davante Adams is expected to be out 4 to 6 weeks with dislocated hands. I sure hope he finds them. Raheem the Scream Mustard got a tangy surprise this week when he lost his knee in a terrible skee-ball accident. Sequins Barfly said yeehaw to his ACL and promptly joined the rodeo. The Giants were not available for comment. Christian McCaffeine-Free felt a little low energy after reading a first edition copy of Camus' The Stranger and decided life was all an absurd journey. He too joined the rodeo. The 49ers' Janine Garoppolo finally decided she had no business playing football and went back to comedy. It remains to be seen who will have the last laugh. And Paris, Cream of Mushroom Campbell, fell into a soup of despair after suffering a knee injury caused by 2 straight days of praying, "Please God, get me away from Phillip Rivers." But perhaps there was no greater injury than the pain suffered by fantasy owners watching Julio Jones this week. His performance can be best summed up with the words of Little Ralphie from A Christmas Story. Football, football, what's a football? Well, that's all for this week's edition of Fumble Risky News. We all know life's been tough these days. We live in strange and uncomfortable times. But I like to take solace in the words of my late grandmother, Iris. If you have at least 1 jar of mayonnaise, you're never truly alone. Back to you, Doctor.
That was pretty special. Thank you, Ed. I know that I'm looking forward to more of his field reports in the future. We'll be hearing from our man on the other side, Ed Moore, in weeks to come. So be on the lookout. Now that we know what we need to do to make our teams perfect, get out there and make those fab moves, make those budget bids, make your team better, get atop the pile, make that comeback that you need this week. Good luck to everybody in week 3. It's been a strange year, and it's only going to get stranger, so you might as well try to win as much as you can. Until then, I just want to remind you all that Ohio is not a real place. Thanks.